Breaking news. Beijing announces economic sovereignty protocols, markets in freefall as US trade axis collapses. The ticker tape on every major news network screamed a variation of the same terrifying message. This was the day the global economic order, a system carefully constructed over 70 years, finally fractured. The world watched, stunned, as the inevitable became reality. The simmering tensions between the United States and China had boiled over, not into war, but into an economic divorce. Beijing's announcement was full of diplomatic language, but its meaning was brutally clear. China was pivoting away from its reliance on the US. The New York Stock Exchange was chaos. Traders shouted into phones. The opening bell a funeral dirge. The Dow Jones plummeted 2,000 points in 5 minutes, triggering circuit breakers. American giants, Apple, Nike, GM, Starbucks, saw their stock values evaporate. The world had bet on symbiosis, and that bet had just gone spectacularly wrong. In Beijing, there was no panic, only steely resolve. President Xi and his advisors oversaw the execution of a plan years in the making. This was a calculated maneuver, not a rash reaction. State media broadcast images of high-tech factories, framing the decoupling as a declaration of independence. Shockwaves radiated outward, rattling every capital and market on the planet. The global supply chain was now a giant question mark. The era of America consuming and China producing was over. The world was entering a new, uncertain chapter. Wall Street's panic was visceral, the terror of the unknown. The grand bargain of globalization, with China as its central pillar, was officially dead. The future of American brands dominating China's middle class vanished overnight. In Shanghai, the market fell, but the descent was controlled. State investors stepped in, projecting stability. The real fear in China was about jobs and the cost of living. The government promised short-term pain for long-term strength. This split was years in the making, born from escalating tensions and a trade war that began with disputes over steel and solar panels. The US imposed tariffs, believing China needed American customers more than the reverse. A miscalculation. Beijing retaliated, targeting key US exports, but its real strategy was deeper, ending dependence on America. The trade war became the perfect cover for China to accelerate its economic pivot. Urgent meetings in Beijing focused not on winning the trade war, but on thriving without America. The West thought it was forcing a deal. In reality, it gave China the excuse to decouple. The world's two largest economies were now on separate tracks. The global order was being rewritten in real time. The trade war began with a classic American misreading apply pressure, and China will concede. Tariffs were meant to cripple China's export machine and force reform, but China's leaders saw this as a temporary phase, an opportunity to build strength and bide their time. The goal was never to be a subordinate ally, but to reclaim their historical place at the center of the world. The trade war was seen as an American attempt to block China's rise. Instead of panicking, China used the conflict to accelerate its shift to domestic consumption and innovation. Economic pain was reframed as patriotic sacrifice. Beijing absorbed the shock, subsidized industries, let its currency depreciate, and redirected trade. Most importantly, it doubled down on technological self-sufficiency and alternative economic blocks. The West expected China to buckle. Instead, it dug in. The gambit meant to bring China to heel gave it the perfect reason to run free. The world's balance of power was shifting. China turned inward, unveiling a sweeping strategy to re-engineer its economy. The old model, being the world's low-cost factory, was over. The new vision, a resilient, self-sustaining domestic market powered by 1.4 billion consumers, massive investments in infrastructure, high-speed rail, 5G networks, created the backbone for a modern consumer economy. Reforms boosted household incomes and social safety nets, encouraging people to spend, not save. Tax cuts and support for small businesses became priorities. The message, your prosperity is now the nation's top priority. A wave of national pride swept the country, Guochao, encouraging consumers to choose Chinese brands. Young people embraced local brands as fashionable and modern. The trade war fostered economic patriotism, and Chinese companies were ready. China was no longer content to make the world's products. It aimed to create the world's next great brands. The era of export dependence was over. China's economic future would be made at home. China's economic pivot is the story of its corporate champions. Once dismissed as imitators, Chinese companies now rival, and often surpass, Silicon Valley. Alibaba, Tencent, Huawei, and BYD lead the charge for economic independence. Alibaba built a digital ecosystem that reshaped commerce and finance, with Alipay making cash nearly obsolete. Tencent's WeChat is a super app, essential for daily life, and a powerful engine for domestic consumption. These companies align their strategies with national goals, promoting local brands and products. Huawei, targeted by US sanctions, became a symbol of defiance and self-reliance. Billions poured into R&D, accelerating efforts to design chips and operating systems. Chinese consumers rallied behind Huawei, turning it into a patriotic brand. The company's ordeal highlighted China's technological vulnerability and galvanized a national mission. China's tech giants are now pioneers, not followers. Their rise is central to Beijing's plan to thrive without the US. The world is watching China's corporate champions redefine innovation. Beijing's grand strategy: dual circulation. The primary engine is internal circulation, a vast, self-sustaining domestic market. The secondary engine is external circulation, trade and investment with the world, but on China's terms. The goal: make China resilient and self-reliant, immune to external pressure. Internal circulation means production, distribution, and consumption happen mostly within China. Instead of assembling iPhones for Ohio, China now builds Huawei phones for Chengdu. This shift reduces reliance on foreign technology and markets. But China isn't sealing itself off. External circulation targets new partners across Asia, Africa, and Latin America. By offering investment and access to its market, China builds a new sphere of influence. Prosperity tied to China makes countries less likely to side with the US in disputes. Dual circulation is both economic and geopolitical strategy. China aims to be the sun around which much of the global economy revolves. The world's balance of power is being redrawn. The Belt and Road Initiative, BRI, is China's most ambitious global project. It's a vast network of railways, ports, and telecoms connecting China to Asia, Europe, Africa, and beyond. The stated goal: economic development and connectivity. The real goal: a Sino-centric world order. Over $1 trillion pledged for projects in 150-plus countries. From ports in Pakistan to railways in Kenya, China is building the infrastructure of a new global order. BRI projects are financed and built by Chinese firms, giving Beijing immense leverage. Countries reliant on Chinese investment are less likely to challenge Beijing on sensitive issues. The BRI is 21st century empire building, based on debt, not conquest. Critics warn of debt traps, corruption, and environmental concerns. Some projects have stalled, but the BRI has fundamentally altered the geopolitical landscape. China is now the primary builder and creditor for much of the developing world. The BRI is the physical manifestation of China's plan to rival American power. The world's infrastructure is being rewired, with Beijing at the center. At the heart of China's strategy is the quest for technological sovereignty. China's leaders know that true power comes from controlling the technologies of the future. The US ban on Huawei chips exposed China's vulnerability. Its entire tech sector could be crippled by a single decision in Washington. Beijing responded with a national crusade to build a domestic semiconductor industry. Billions are being invested in chip design, fabrication, and advanced research. The goal: end all reliance on foreign technology. It's a monumental task, but for China, it's existential. Beyond chips, China leads in electric vehicles, dominating the supply chain from minerals to batteries. Companies like BYD now outsell global rivals, including Tesla. China is racing to set global standards in AI, quantum computing, and biotech. Its state-led model fuses government, academia, and industry toward a single goal. The question is no longer if China can innovate, but if the world can keep up. Technological sovereignty is China's ultimate play for global leadership. China's greatest challenge may not be the US, but itself. The state-led model that powered its rise has created deep structural problems. The property sector is in crisis, with ghost cities and mounting debt. Local governments face fiscal crises, limiting their ability to fund social safety nets. The top-down system struggles to manage complex financial risks. Beijing must deleverage without triggering collapse. Looming behind is a demographic time bomb, an aging, shrinking population. A smaller workforce threatens domestic consumption and strains pensions and healthcare. Demography is destiny, and China's profile is a formidable headwind. Can China prosper without the US? Can it overcome its own contradictions? The answer will define the global landscape for the rest of the century. The great decoupling is underway. The world holds its breath as China's future unfolds.